have you say your name and spell it, just in case somebody else watches this video?
Sure. Larry Obhof, O-B-H-O-F.
Thank you very much. Could you just start with your initial reaction to the decision this morning?
Sure. I'm very disappointed in the decision. I think that if you look back at the history of the country, in more than 200 years, you've never seen the federal government exercise the type of power that it will through the individual mandate. The federal government has never before required citizens of the United States to purchase any service or any other sort of product. And I think if you look at the reasoning that the court used, it's a little disappointing because they essentially said that the mandate is constitutional under the taxing power of the federal government. And the president himself on national TV specifically said that the mandate and its associated penalty are not a tax.
You can look at me, you don't have to look at Cam. What do we lose by the Attorney General seemed to think it was a split decision, a loss and a gain, the ruling as a tax but not as a commerce. Is there any solace, for lack of a better word, for you in that?
I think that there is. The type of power that the federal government is trying to exercise is something that they said in the statute they were doing under the regulation of commerce. And if you look back at all of the Commerce Clause cases that the Supreme Court has decided over the last 60 or 70 years, they've always required that there be some sort of economic activity. And what the states argued here was that there was no activity, that failing to purchase insurance is not something that can be regulated under the commerce power. The majority of the court agreed with that, and I'm glad that they did. I think that that's the right ruling on that front. However, using the taxing and spending powers to allow this anyway functionally means that the federal government can now require people to engage in specific behaviors as long as they attach some sort of tax or some sort of penalty to failing to do so.
And you've been involved in this case from early stages. Did you ever foresee that outcome?
I did not foresee an outcome where the taxing and spending powers were used. And in particular, because the president himself had been so straightforward in rejecting the notion that the individual mandate was a tax. I think his exact words on ABC News were, "It's absolutely not a tax." And Congress generally knows how to use the words that they want to use. There were other tax increases in this bill, and where they intended it to be a tax, they said so, and they called it a tax. And here they called it a penalty. So I'm a little surprised by the court's ruling.
Can you talk a little bit about what it was like to be involved in the case early on, and then to see the decision today? I mean, what's that process been like to watch for you?
Well, it's been very interesting. I think that it's been interesting for a lot of people. I think that most of the voters have followed it pretty closely. Certainly people feel very strongly about this bill one way or another. I think a large majority of them probably won't approve of today's decision. If you look at issue 3 last year, it passed by a margin of about 2-1. And I think that, frankly, the voters have legitimate concerns today and a legitimate reason to feel worried about the future. If you look at what happened here, essentially the president is saying that he can backdoor middle-class tax increases, that he can go out and publicly sell a bill one way, saying that it's not a tax increase, and then go into court and say something very different. So what we have here is a large middle-class tax increase, and it's cause for concern, not just because of this bill, but because of what it might mean for any future increases.
Can I ask you to, did you have any?
I have all kinds of questions.
Okay, well, go for it. I'm ready to go back and forth.
Can you explain your understanding of how the constitutional amendment in Ohio, how today's ruling affects that? Because I'm sure a lot of people voted for that thinking, okay, we're blocking this federal mandate. Is that the case?
I think the federal courts probably will not invalidate the mandate in states that have passed things like that. As a general rule, federal law trumps state law, and there's a very clear requirement in the Supremacy Clause that that's how it applies. I think that issue 3 was important for another reason, which was that the voters were given the opportunity to express their concerns about this bill and to tell the federal government what they thought about it, just as they did, I think, in the elections in 2010. So moving forward, I think that what I'd like to see is Congress repeal large portions of the bill. I don't think that it's sound policy. I think that if you look at the changes that have been made to Medicaid and the effect that they will have on the state of Ohio, there's real cause for concern. Here in Ohio, we have dealt with very difficult budget cycles. We have reined in spending. We have tried to restore fiscal responsibility, and I think we've done a pretty good job of that. We just got the rainy day fund, which had been whittled down to a few dollars, back up to a few $100 million now, and it looks like we did it just in time to spend it on federal mandates.
Realistically then, I mean, was issue 3 anything more than a political statement by people voting for it?
I think that it was largely a political statement. I think that if you look at the litigation as it happened in Florida and went through the appeals process, the federal government also tried numerous times to argue that parties that had not passed a statute or an amendment like that didn't have standing to litigate. So at the time I thought that it was useful, frankly, so that Ohio could have its day in court.
In terms of setting up the insurance exchange and whatnot, that's part of the bill, but the state has kind of moved sort of slowly on that and missing out on some fundings to help that, or very likely to do so if they haven't already. If you could put on your lawmaker hat, and what's the next step for Ohio as far as that goes? And are we at a disadvantage because we now do have to implement this law?
I think that we did the right thing by waiting until the court ruled. I'm not sure that we need to have a long drawn-out legislative process over whether to set up an exchange or over what type of exchange we want until we know whether we have to do it or not. In light of this ruling, I think that we'll have to sit down with the administration and with the House of Representatives and decide what the best course is moving forward. There's a lot of work that will need to be done, but we're up to the task.
But that's not going to happen before November, correct?
I wouldn't expect it to.
And you talked about the rainy day fund and balancing the budget and whatnot, and there's a very real possibility that the state has now missed out on federal money for setting up that exchange.
Well, I think the more important concern, if we're worried about the state's finances, are the changes to Medicaid. We've already talked to some of the staff here that work on our budget issues. We've already talked to some people in the administration about what this means moving forward, and we're looking at potentially a 50% increase in the number of people on Medicaid, which would be an additional 1.1 million persons between now and 2018. That would impose a significant strain on the state's budget to the tune of billions of dollars. And actually in the next biennium, we're looking at somewhere between $750 to $950 million just over those 2 years from what we expect to be the increases in Medicaid. And that's a part that I think is somewhat frustrating for us here at the state level, because we did a lot of work in last year's budget to improve our Medicaid delivery system, to save money, cut costs, but at the same time deliver the services to the people that they need. And now we're essentially being told by the federal government, hey, we're not going to save money. You're going to spend billions of dollars that you don't have. And we'll have to come up with that money somewhere else. And the rainy day fund is going to be in jeopardy, frankly. And we've struggled to fund local governments and schools and a lot of other things. And all of those things are going to get a long, hard look now. We'll have to find the money somewhere.
Can you briefly describe your role in this lawsuit in the early days? What was your involvement in that?
I was part of the legal team that filed the lawsuit on behalf of the state of Florida and originally 12 other states. And then as the case progressed, I think we ended up with about 26 states involved. So I helped draft the amended complaint and most of the trial level briefing. And there were a number of other people in the private sector who did it, as well as lawyers from attorneys general's offices across the country.
Thank you.
Okay,
Appreciate
thanks.
it.